Life.Church created this podcast because we all need healthy conversations with real people. So this podcast is here to help you start real conversations with your life group, friends, and family. Now, on to the show.
Welcome to the You've Heard It Said podcast. This is Allie.
And this is Jason.
And we've spent a lot of time talking about time and money these last few weeks. So I'm curious, what is your biggest revelation so far, Jason?
This might surprise you.
Okay.
But I think I'm still kind of working it out. Like there's something about time and money that I think helps me to see God better or know him better, that it can make me better. And it can make me worse. So, I don't know. I'm still working it out a little bit.
Yeah, I like it. I think for me, it's just making me realize that we can talk about these things, you know? Like, I feel like we put it in the taboo category. But when I think about all the other things that I'm surprisingly comfortable talking about, like personality tests and traits and all those things, it's like, those are pretty personal. And so money and time are too, but like we can talk about them the same way that we would talk about those other things.
Right.
So anyways, we've talked about a lot of principles and practices, and I think that's valuable because we don't have like a money class in school, which I think would have been super helpful.
Yes, that would have been.
Right. Like I saw this meme the other day that was like, I'm so glad that I learned about parallelograms instead of money in school so that during parallelogram season, I'd be prepared to pay the IRS.
That's pretty good. I'm just thinking now, like, what other classes would be nice to have in school?
Folding a fitted sheet. That's what I want to know. And also handling money, for sure.
On a fitted sheet, you just kind of make it a ball.
No,
it's okay.
I feel like there's got to be a way to make it look nice. Like you didn't just like throw it in a closet somewhere and forget about it. And then also cooking. I really could have used that. And then also just like life management.
What do you mean by life management?
I mean, just like tips for being an adult, like a human. Like there's
like the You've Heard
many...
It Said podcast.
Yeah, there you go. Just like things that's like, hey, don't forget to pay your bills. And like, here's a crash course on like filling out those papers at the doctor's office because I always mess something
papers.
up. And then it's like embarrassing because they're like, did you mean to
check
fill this
the
out?
box if you've ever done one of these 940 things. I'm like, I don't even know what some of these words are. Like, why do people do that one?
I don't know.
Yeah, so I'm like, some classes that I think I could have used is like how to be the same kind and gracious human being that you are when you meet a stranger in public. Also be that person on social media. Like if there's just a class for that, like you don't have to tell the world all of your opinions. Like, in fact, you might not be a professional on whatever the current event is. And you don't have to tell everybody that you are. And that's okay.
That's good.
Living through a global pandemic, that would have been a good class.
Yeah, that's fair.
And budgeting.
Yeah.
Budgeting would have been good.
That's fair. So as we wrap up this season, we want to have a holistic response to all the things we've heard. So think about the advice and the perspectives you've gained, and then just think about one way you can start managing your resources differently.
Yeah, and then we'll even provide a list of our favorite resources in this week's conversation guide.
For sure. So as we close out, we thought that we would ask all the questions you really wanted to know, the ones that would have been in a Money 101 class, to our financial advisor friend, Porter Cunningham.
Porter Cunningham.
Here we go. Hi friends, it's Allie here, and I'm just letting you know that our financial advisor, Porter Cunningham, works for Oklahoma Financial Center. All opinions expressed by Porter are solely his opinions and do not represent the opinions of the Oklahoma Financial Center. This interview is purely for informational purposes and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of Oklahoma Financial Center may own securities discussed in this podcast. Now, let's get to our conversation with Porter Cunningham. All right. Well, Porter, welcome back to the You've Heard It Said podcast. We're super excited to get to hear all of your advice again.
Yeah, I'm happy to be back again.
So we actually did some polling and we asked a bunch of people what questions they would want to ask a financial advisor. We got a lot of them. So we'll just get into it if that's okay.
Let's go. Let's fire away.
All right. So the first question is, how often do you see people whose relationship to money is anxiety-free, generous, and others-centered?
Not as often as I'd like.
Not as often. So when you do see those people, have you noticed any themes or lessons or practices that you could pass on to us?
Yep. What I mentioned last time I was on with you guys, which is discipline. We see no matter how much money people make, a lot of people think, well, the most generous people are the ones that are really wealthy. It can make things easier, but what we really see is they're disciplined, right? They have a system in place. They follow it. Doesn't matter how many zeros are on the end of your bank account. It's about knowing, here's what I'm going to spend on myself and my family, and then this is what I'm allowed to go and spend money on other people.
That's good to know. So another question is, after I know what my expenses are, do you have any guidance about what percentages should go to each category? So for example, housing, groceries, that kind of thing.
Well, there's a lot of data out there that says, hey, you should spend X percentage of your monthly income on this and that. We personally don't feel that way. We'll take a look at your needs and wants. It'd be pretty easy to identify if you're spending too much money on something like rent or mortgage.
Okay. So another person asked, how can I make budgeting feel less restrictive?
So therein lies the problem with budgeting, right? It's a chore. It's just like cleaning the toilets or running the vacuum. It's like, man, I really don't want to do this Sunday afternoon. The best advice I can give here is leverage technology, use what works for you. Maybe if you've been trying to do it with pen and paper, you get behind and then you're just like blow it off. If you haven't written it down for a couple weeks, it's like, man, that's so big. I don't want to do it right now. It's okay to start over. Okay. It's okay to say, I fell off the wagon a little bit. Now I need to get back. That happens to us all. But leverage technology, see if there's something out there that will do it for you. And then trust me when I say that discipline equals freedom, right? So if you're disciplined with your budget, you're not going to feel restricted by it. Eventually you're going to feel like, okay, I've gotten everything taken care of, gotten everything squared away. And here's what I have to go be flexible and be fruitful with.
I like that perspective. Okay. So another person asked, what's your advice for dealing with overspending and the guilt that can come with it?
Yeah, guilt. It's real. It happens to us all. We know when we spend a little bit too much. If we're tracking it, maybe it's that credit card statement that you really just don't want to open, your bank statement, after a fun weekend with friends and you're like, I just really, Monday morning, I really don't want to check my bank account. It's going to be there whether you check it or not. So the best I can say, swallow big, check it. You're going to feel better after you checked it anyway, and reset and move on down the road. We're going to use this as a learning opportunity and move forward. Everyone deals with it.
That's comforting coming from the financial advisor, so I like it. Okay, so credit cards, yes or no? And if you say yes, what is the best credit card to get?
So here's where we're going to get into some of these questions where I want to preface all these with a big it depends, right? So it depends on you and your personal situation. However, I do like credit cards in certain situations. You have to be disciplined. You must have proven that if you have a budget, you can stick to it. I want 6 or 12 months of history of saying, hey, we're not going to fall off the wagon, especially get through your first Christmas time. Okay. It's a big time when people really let it go and they're like, oh, I was only going to spend $100 on this person, but I found this and it's great. Get through that season of your life first. Prove that you can do it once without credit cards because they can be a slippery slope. If you can do that, then credit cards may be good for you. Okay. There are some opportunities out there. They provide a superior level of protection so far as identity theft, fraud, fraudulent expenses go. And there are some good programs out there that if you can leverage them, they can provide some value to you as a consumer. So certainly be careful. Follow the rules of credit card spending, which number 1 is pay off your balance every month. Number 2 is stick to your budget. And then number 3 is choose wisely. I use them personally. I like the fact that if somebody gets a hold of my credit card information, I can just call the credit card company. They wipe it off my book. I don't have to pay for it. They send me a new card. Whereas on the other side, if you have a debit card, somebody gets a hold of your debit card information, spends your money, that's out of your bank account. And now you have to call the bank and ask the bank to put money back in your account. It can be a lot harder process.
Okay, so how can I realistically pay off debt when it feels like I can't get ahead or I never make enough money?
Yeah, this is probably the biggest question that we get as far as when you really feel like you're in a hole with it. So going back to the budget and then needs and wants, okay? So the first thing is you've got to figure out where you're spending your money. And then remember that it's not necessarily about how much money you make, okay? So figure out where you're spending your money. Talk to your spouse if you're married. Engage a professional if you want to. Financial Peace University is a great thing to do. And then figure out those wants. Figure out how much you're spending on entertainment, on dining out. Understand that it's all a give and take. So you can either continue to live the lifestyle you're living now and have this kind of gloom over your life, or you can take control of your finances and be free. And in the short term, that might mean a lot of sacrifice. You might have to go from being a 2-car household to a 1-car household. You might have to make some really tough decisions, but if you can figure that out and be disciplined in that regard, you're going to feel a lot better.
How do I save for a house, and what considerations should I be thinking through?
Sure. So this is a really timely question with what we've seen in the housing market in the last 2 years or so. How do you save for a house? The answer to this question is going to depend on how well do you do when you're trying to save money for anything, right? So if you're saying, I'm going to save $50 a month or $100 a month for a down payment on a house, talk to your bank about setting up a savings account or a second checking account or something along those lines. Make sure you're not paying for it. There's way too many free checking and savings options out there nowadays. If it's something that you're going to try to purchase in the next 5 years, I would recommend probably leaving it in cash. A lot of people come to me and say, Porter, I want to use this money for a down payment on a house. What can we invest it in? Anytime you're investing in something, you're trading risk for return. Okay. So the risk of you losing your down payment for a house and having to push, not losing, but the value of it falling and having to push that timeline of purchasing a house out is usually not worth the return that you could potentially get on that money and grow it. Most of the time, we're going to say, hey, find a savings account, put it in a savings account, leave it there. Identify a dollar amount that fits within your budget, set up that recurring, ongoing contribution into your savings account, and then watch that number grow and kind of identify the timeline.
That's good. So this next question is one that you mentioned on the last episode that you get asked a lot. It's, should I be looking into additional sources of income? And if so, what are good sources of supplemental income?
Yeah, the question, should I be looking? Why are you looking? Why do you want additional income? Is it for a specific purpose? Do you have a balanced budget at home with your current quote unquote day job? And if you do, then why do you want supplemental income? Are you single and you have time and you have a specific thing you want to save for? Sure, that could be a great reason. If you feel like you're behind and you're spending too much, obviously we've discussed that already. Maybe you need to look internally. Make sure that it doesn't take away from your family if you do have a family. Make sure that it's something that isn't going to negatively impact other areas of your life. But if that's something that you do want to continue to look into, at this point in time, I would say maybe something in what we call the gig economy, right? So there's a lot of opportunity out there for ride-sharing services, for food delivery services. I know a lot of people that participate in those, have done those in the past as kind of a bridge or a brief supplement. That's a great thing to do to get you started earlier on, or pretty quickly rather. And beyond that, I can't really mention anything else that I would know for sure would be a good option.
That's great. So we kind of started talking about this in the housing conversation a little bit, but the next question is it better to save money or invest it? And then they also asked what percentage of savings should be in a bank versus invested in the stock market.
So here we go again with it depends, right?
Yeah.
So 2 questions here. The first question I can answer with, it depends on what that money is for. Okay. And when I say what the money is for, what I'm really asking is how long do you have for it to sit before you need to access it? If it's a very short-term thing, if it's your emergency savings account and you need to have the ability to get to it within 30 days and you want to make sure that that value is the same no matter what's going on in the world, keep it in a checking or savings account. And that's going to be your emergency savings. That's going to be, it could be up to a down payment on a house. It could be if you're saving for a new car. Anything that's going to be relatively short term, from 6 months to maybe 5 years out, saving it in this term would be better. Investing is going to be for things that have timelines 5 years or longer that you can accept the risk, okay? So as we mentioned earlier, it's always a trade-off. You're trading the risk of the volatility, the value going up or down for the return that you're going to get on the growth of the money. So retirement money should be invested. It should be invested in some way, shape, or form. What it's invested in is going to be based on your personal risk tolerance. Saving money for children that are young for college should probably be invested. You need to leverage that growth, things of that nature. What percentage? Again, it depends, but this time it depends on your situation, on how comfortable you are personally with having money ready versus money that you would have to access. So I don't really like providing a hard and fast rule. A lot of people say 6 months of income in savings as your emergency savings. That would be mainly if you were in an accident, something happened to you and you weren't able to work. That would at least provide 6 months of income for your house before it ran out and you'd have to figure something else out. But again, that's a very personal individual question to answer.
Yeah. So the next question has to do with retirement, kind of like what you're talking about. So when do I need to start investing in a 401k? Also, does it carry over if you get a different job?
So a 401k, just to provide a little bit of background, is an employer-sponsored retirement plan. So it has to be something that your employer has set up for benefit of the employees. All 401ks are different. So if you have experience with one in the past, it doesn't necessarily mean that the way that 401k was run or the company that ran that 401k will be the same at future jobs. And in fact, you can work for somebody that doesn't have a 401k. So keep that in mind. The answer to when should you start is usually as soon as you're eligible. Okay. Usually, as soon as you can start putting money in a 401k, it's a really good idea because it does carry a lot of tax benefits for how it's invested and how it's contributed. The earlier you start, the better. If you have more questions about it, maybe engage a professional at that point in time. And the great thing about a 401k is, to your second question, it does carry over if you get a different job. It doesn't automatically. There's a lot of options when you leave employment with an employer who had a 401k. And let me give you just a really quick what those options usually are. You can leave it in your old employer's 401k. Okay, so you don't have to take it out. With some exceptions, you are normally protected and can leave it in there until you decide what you want to do with it. You can roll it to your new employer's 401k if they have one. So take it with you if you get a different job. There may be some money in that account that you have to leave with your old employer. It's called vesting. Again, that depends on the plan, and that should be explained in your plan parameters. So you can bring it with you to your new job. If your new job doesn't have a 401k, you can roll it to an individual retirement account. That allows you to add money to it, to continue to invest it, and to do it without any tax consequences. And then finally, when you leave your job, you can cash it out. If you're under the age of 59 and a half, you're probably going to pay an extra 10% penalty on top of some taxes. And so this is usually the worst idea and one that we try to avoid, but it is accessible to you if you need it.
Okay. So that ties into the next question, which is, what is a Roth IRA compared to a standard IRA?
Yeah. So now we're going to get into a little bit of tax discussion. So I'll try to stay really high level and not lose everybody here. So standard IRA, sometimes called a pre-tax IRA, sometimes called a traditional IRA. Okay, all those words are interchangeable. So traditional 401k, pre-tax 401k, standard 401k. Anytime you hear those words talked about with a 401k and an IRA, we're talking about how the money was taxed when it went into the investment account, when it went into the IRA or into the 401k. Pre-tax means it was done before any taxes were taken out. All you need to know as a participant, as an investor, is when you take money out of a pre-tax, standard, or traditional 401k or IRA, you'll owe income taxes on that money. Your other choice can be a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k, sometimes called after tax, but be careful with that terminology. You're going to look for the keyword of Roth. If it's referred to as a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k, because it can be inside the 401k as well, you're going to pay taxes on that money before it's contributed into your investment. Because you're going to pay your taxes up front, when you take that money out of the account, you're not going to owe any taxes on it. Okay? So the benefit there is usually because in this type of investment account, our goal as participants, as investors, is for that money to grow over a long-term timeline. So if your money can grow over 10, 20, 30, even maybe 40 years of investing, then you get quite a bit of investment growth potentially that you can take back without paying any taxes on.
So what are the pros and cons of a 401k versus a standard high-yield savings account?
Remember that, as we just talked about, a 401k is meant to be a long-term retirement savings account. So the goal there is to add money over time and to invest it and for it to grow over time so that you can have money to live off of when you can't or don't want to work anymore. Standard high-yield savings account is typically going to be a savings account. And usually the goal of that account is to park money for a much shorter timeline. And I want to remind the audience that high yield is a relative term. How much interest these savings accounts pay floats based on where the interest rates are in today's environment. So as you're listening to this, pay attention to what that quote unquote high yield is and make sure that comparatively it actually is something that is advantageous to you, because if rates are low, you may not be earning any money. If rates are a little bit higher, maybe you do earn a little bit of money on it, but it's all comparative. And then it's all about timeline. So money that you are allocating to your 401k, you should be comfortable with it being locked away until you're 60, 65, 70 years old. Money that you're allocating or putting into your savings account should be something that you can get to should you need it.
Yeah. So with the roller coaster that the economy has been lately, is it smart to consider investing at the moment? And if it is, what kind of investments are solid throughout whenever the economy is tumultuous?
It depends on what the purpose of the money that you're investing is, okay? It also depends on your personal risk tolerance. So this is probably where I'm wading into territory that is going to be really personal and individualized, and you need to really either talk with your financial professional or really do some internal checking to see if it's right for you. So retirement money, 401ks, IRAs, money that you are allocating for retirement, yes, you should invest that unless you are at retirement, near retirement, or in retirement. But if you're young, if you're in your 20s or 30s, if you've got 10, 20, 30-year timeline, put your money to work and know that in the stock market, for instance, you historically have been paid a very nice return in the neighborhood of 7, 8, 9, 10% per year. And in return for that, you accept that there's volatility, okay? There's volatility based on the economy, based on inflation, based on interest rates. You have to be able to see the forest for the trees and say, hey, I'm committing my money for the long term, and in the long term, I believe in this. If you do decide to invest, what type of investments will be solid throughout? I'm going to say if you are a long-term investor, historically, you can go back and look, pick a number, 1920, 1926. Look at the S&P 500, look at the U.S. stock market, look at what it's done. There's a ton of information out there at your fingertips online about how the quote-unquote stock market has reacted to negative events over time. I'm sure it's tumultuous right now. There's always something that's going on. Stock market chugs along, right? It's all about growing the economy. It's just all about being able to accept that risk. So that's a long way of saying I personally am a big believer in buying stock in large U.S.-based companies. That may not be right for you, but that is certainly a good place to look.
That's great. So with the current instability of cryptocurrency, is that something I should avoid or something I should invest in? And also, can you explain what is cryptocurrency?
I'm not a crypto expert, so I'm going to do my best. And there might be some people out there who, slamming their hands on the dashboard as they're listening to this driving down the road when they hear this explanation. So cryptocurrencies are essentially a new type of currency / investment vehicle / bartering coin that is all online based. It does not have a physical presence as most currency around the world does. It is designed with the blockchain technology in mind. So it's not really a currency in the sense that a currency has to be stable and has to be established and in the historical term really has been regulated. They right now should not really be used as an effective exchange of currency for something because they are so volatile, right? But something to avoid or something to invest in, that's a really long answer to me saying, it depends, right? If you are firmly in the conversation that we were having earlier about wants and needs and budget and feeling like you're behind, please don't invest in cryptocurrency. That is not your way out. If you have a well-diversified portfolio and you feel like you understand it, maybe it's for you at that point in time. I personally am avoiding it because there's still so much uncertainty with it. And I feel like it's something, as we've seen, the value can be cut in half relatively quickly. So be very careful with it.
So should I be buying individual shares of companies or buying into index funds?
It depends. Most investors should be buying index funds or mutual funds. Index funds are a version of mutual funds. When I say mutual funds, what I mean is a mutual fund is an investment vehicle that is sponsored by, run by an investment company. So investors mutually participate. They give the money to this fund manager, and that fund then goes out and buys those individual shares of companies for you. And so with $1, you can buy the S&P 500 index fund, and with $1, you can buy about 500 companies all at once. Whereas if you're going to buy individual shares of companies, you're going to have to go out and pick those companies, right? So for most investors, index funds or actively managed mutual funds are the way to go because they do the work for you. You pay a little bit to those fund managers to provide that service, but for most investors, that's a good value. Buying individual shares of companies can be very risky because if you buy a share of a company and that company goes bankrupt, that's an ownership share of that company and that your money can go to zero. The likelihood of your value of an index fund going to zero is much, much lower because, again, if you buy the S&P 500 fund, you have 500 companies. If one of those companies goes bankrupt, the other 499 most likely are not going to also go bankrupt in a very short time period. So your value may suffer a little bit, but your likelihood of going to zero is much lower.
That's great. Okay, so I have a few final questions here for you. So the first one is, what's the question we didn't ask you that we should have asked you?
Yeah, I didn't see any questions in here about saving for the next generation.
Oh, okay.
So that's normally a pretty hot topic. So what if I want to save for my kid or my children or my grandchildren? So there's some really good options out there available to you as an investor if you want to do that. Of course, you can always just, again, open a savings account for them. If you wanted to save for a specific purpose, maybe college education, 529 plans are still a great way to do that. A 529 plan is sponsored by the state in which you reside, but you can participate as an investor in any 529 plan in any state, and you can use that money to pay for education in any state. So a 529 plan is meant to be saved and used for a minor child's K through 12 education at a private school or college education. A lot of vocational technical schools are included in that now. So if you want to save money for your kids to pay for college, that's a great way to do it.
Okay, so how do we know when we need to see a financial advisor?
2 ways to answer to this question. One, when DIY turns into SOS. So whenever you've been doing it yourself and then maybe you got busy and you got behind or you messed something up along the way and now you got a nasty letter from the IRS and you're like, ooh, what did I do? Maybe engage a professional, have them help you clean it up. But also, so it's all about value. It's kind of like changing the oil on your car. A lot of people still do it. For me, it would probably take me an hour and a half, 2 hours, and I feel like my time is better served elsewhere. So I would choose to pay someone to do that to make sure it's done properly in a much more efficient amount of time. And then, of course, the complexity of your situation. If you, all of a sudden, you've had a very simple financial life, but then something changes and now you have a very complex situation, the peace of mind factor is really important. So find someone that's a fiduciary, find someone that's going to put your best interests over their own as far as how they're compensated, as far as what they do, and let them give you some good advice. There's some really good people in this industry.
That's great. So do you have any final financial advice or best kept secrets that we should know about?
I've said it before, and I'll say it again. It's not the number of zeros behind your bank account that makes a difference, okay? There are just as many millionaires out there that live paycheck to paycheck as there are people like us, okay? Assuming that no one in this room is a millionaire. But
Safe bet.
But seriously, I've personally interacted with them, and so it's not about how much money you make.
That's great. Okay, so my final question is, how has being a financial advisor affected your faith?
I would say my faith has influenced me being a financial advisor more than anything, because like so much else in this world, there are a lot of lessons that we can take out of Christianity, out of faith, and apply it to our financial lifestyles. You know, earlier we mentioned being other-centered with our money, making sure that tithing is included in our budget, making sure that we balance the discussion about having a great lifestyle, but also being able to bless others. And so being able to filter it through that lens is probably a much more accurate way of saying it.
My favorite thing that Porter said was that it really doesn't matter how many zeros are in your bank account. The principles apply to all of us, which I thought was really interesting coming from a financial advisor.
So I think it's a lot like what we've actually been saying all season, that your specific situation, it's going to look different. And it's important for us to acknowledge that. It's important for you to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
It's good for us to have empathy for ourselves and for others, and to know that we might have certain advantages in our finances that others don't, or certain disadvantages that others don't. And at the same time, I do like that we talked about the fact that we can have more impact on our finances than we might actually realize. Like we can do something about it.
For sure.
So I'm just going to read this scripture, because I think it's going to help me to share some things that I've been thinking and feeling and like maybe understand, like what is my takeaway for this season. So in 1 Timothy 6, 17 and 18, the Apostle Paul, he's writing to Timothy, who he's like mentoring as a young leader in the church. And this is the NLT. It translates Paul's letter like this. He says, "Teach those who are rich in this world not to be proud, and not to trust in their money, which is so unreliable. Their trust should be in God, who richly gives us all we need for our enjoyment. There's that word enjoyment. Tell them to use their money to do good. They should be rich in good works and generous to those in need, always being ready to share with others. Here's a few things just as I understand them. First, money is not a reliable place to put your trust, but it's not all evil either. So we can use it to do good, he's saying. And then being rich isn't about what you have, it's about what you give to others. And we can trust in God because he not only provides enough, he provides enjoyment. This is where I'm going to get to like the stuff I'm feeling part. So in Matthew 7, Jesus tells a story that I think like even, it's like the other part of what I think Paul is getting at, that not only does God provide for our enjoyment, but he enjoys doing it. Let that sink in a little bit. This is a story where Jesus says that even earthly fathers won't give you a snake when you ask for a stick. I love that story. So basically, God notices you, he notices what you need, and then he enjoys giving you even more than you need. So I'm actually going to counseling. I have been for quite a few sessions because of how hard it is for me to get what I just said. I'm sometimes worried that God's doing the bare minimum or that he's not really enough or that he's not really noticing me. I spend a ton of energy, even a lot of money, looking out for myself, providing for myself. And then when I have what I think that I've worked to gain, I don't enjoy it. And it's basically living like God might not see me and therefore he might not come through for me. And I think a lot of our concern about how we use our time and our money has something to do with that question. But Jesus says God enjoys giving us good gifts. So think about that. It means God, he doesn't just notice you, he's with you. He's not just with you, he likes you. When that really settles in for you, it doesn't matter how many zeros you have. It's always more than enough. And it's more than enough to share with others. And you can't help but share it with others. So this is why I think it feels so good when we do give to others, because we're feeling what he feels when he gives to us.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that what you said about not trusting God to go above the bare minimum rings true for me too. I sometimes believe God is good, but I have a lot of trouble believing he's kind. But he is. And it does remind me of what Jesus said in Matthew 6:21, that where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And so the more that I put my treasure in places that honor God, the more that my heart is drawn toward him too. And then it becomes less of this chore or obligation, but more of this delight where I get to look for ways to partner with him in helping others and sharing.
So I'm thinking of Jesus in Matthew 25, and he's saying, whenever you share water with someone or give someone clothes who needs it, you're doing it for me. And maybe one reason Jesus is always trying to get us to help other people is so that we can experience that feeling of being generous, so that we can actually realize what God feels towards us.
Yeah.
So much of this goes back to breaking the belief that only certain parts of our lives can be spiritual. Every way that we use our time and our money, it forms us. And being formed is deeply spiritual. It's one of the most spiritual things we do. So we've talked about so much, and I'm glad that we're landing right now on who God is. It's great to be a good steward or Stuart, as Allie says it. If you don't get that joke, you need to go back and listen to like all of the episodes in this season where I reference it. But it's tempting to come up with some kind of plan, like a human-made plan to do all of this perfectly that's really just rooted in providing for yourself. And it's not really rooted in trusting God.
1,000%. So it's really easy, like we just talked about, to get to the end of the season and create a ton of action steps. And while we definitely do hope you do that, and we do have a huge part to play, so much more of it is just about acknowledging who God is and believing that Jesus' life and his words are the way to live. And that's why Jesus starts the Beatitudes with, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." And why? Because they recognize their need for God.
Yeah.
So time and money help us recognize our need for God. They help us remember that we can't do it all on our own. They remind us that when everything on paper looks like it's never going to work, we can trust that God is enough. And so no matter what your finances or your time or your calendar look like right now, there is hope.
And enjoyment.
So this week, as you reflect on this season, talk about these questions with your friends, your family, or your life group. What one truth from this season will you apply to your life?
We hope you enjoyed this episode of You've Heard It Said, but even more than that, I hope you start your own conversation about what you heard with someone you care about. And if you're not sure how to talk about money and time, listen, neither am I. So we've got you covered with the Conversation Guide, and it has all sorts of questions and resources to empower you to start those conversations and topics in like a way that's really going to be meaningful. And I think when you talk about it, you're probably going to feel more ready to do something about it. So you can find that in the show notes wherever you're listening, and have a great week.